Someone you love dies. You have 24 to 72 hours to make thousands of dollars worth of decisions you've never made before. You're sleep deprived, you're in shock, you're grieving. And the person sitting across from you, in the quiet room with soft lighting and tissue boxes on every table, is a trained salesperson. The funeral industry generates over $20 billion a year in the United States. It is one of the only industries in the world where the customer is guaranteed to be emotionally devastated at the moment of purchase. And it has built an entire business model around that fact. Today we're going to talk about what funerals actually cost, why they cost that much, and what happens in that room that nobody warns you about. Section 1. The numbers. Let's start with what you're actually paying. The median cost of a traditional funeral with burial in the United States is $7,848. That does not include the cemetery plot, the burial vault, or the headstone, which can add another $3,000 to $5,000. All in, the average American funeral costs between $10,000 and $12,000. In expensive markets like Hawaii or California, that number climbs to $15,000 or more. That makes a funeral the third largest expense most families will ever face, after a home and a car. Except unlike a home or a car, you have no time to shop, no ability to negotiate, and no emotional capacity to think clearly. Funeral costs have risen by nearly 300% since 1986. That's an average annual increase of 3.68%, faster than general inflation in most years. And here's the detail that makes this truly brutal. Most families have no idea what anything costs before they walk in. Only 27% of U.S. funeral homes with websites post any prices online at all. The industry has systematically kept pricing opaque because, as one consumer advocate put it, an ignorant customer is an easier customer to exploit. Section 2. What you're actually paying for. Here's what a typical funeral bill looks like when it's broken down. Basic services fee, $2,000 to $3,000. This is a mandatory charge that covers the funeral director's time, paperwork, permits, and coordination. You pay it regardless of anything else you choose. Embalming, $700 to $900. This is the preservation of the body for viewing. Here's something most people don't know. Embalming is not legally required in most U.S. states. But funeral homes rarely volunteer this information, and some frame it as mandatory. Use of facilities for viewing, $400 to $500. Use of facilities for the ceremony, another $500. Hearse, $350. The casket. This is where the real money is. A standard metal casket runs $2,500. Wood caskets start around $3,000. Premium models go to $10,000 and beyond. And here's the markup that should stop you cold. Caskets often sell in funeral homes for 300% to 500% more than their wholesale price. A casket that costs the funeral home $600 gets sold to you for $3,000. A $700 wholesale casket becomes $7,200 in a showroom. By law, specifically the FTC's funeral rule, you are allowed to purchase a casket from a third-party retailer and the funeral home must accept it. They cannot charge a handling fee. But most people don't know this, and funeral homes certainly don't advertise it. Add everything up: basic fee, embalming, facilities, transportation, casket, death certificates, cemetery plot, vault, headstone. And you're looking at $12,000 to $15,000 for a complete traditional burial, spent in 48 hours. While grieving. Section 3. The psychology of grief selling. Now for the part that nobody in the industry wants to talk about. The funeral arrangement meeting is not just a practical conversation, it is a sales interaction, one designed around the specific psychological vulnerabilities of grieving people. Researchers have a term for what happens in these meetings: death-related status consumption. When someone close to you dies, you experience an intense psychological need to demonstrate love, respect, and social worth. You want the funeral to reflect how important this person was. And the funeral industry has spent decades learning how to activate that impulse and direct it toward premium purchases. Wouldn't you like to give them the very best? This is the last gift you can give. Most families in your situation choose this option. These phrases, and variations of them, appear in industry training materials. There is an actual continuing education course approved by 27 state licensing boards for funeral directors to maintain their licenses called Upselling Without Upsetting the Client. A Money magazine investigation obtained access to the course. It advises funeral directors to ask about the family's budget, then say, "We're going to stay as close to that number as possible," and then proceed to exceed it by a target of 20%. The casket showroom is engineered. Premium caskets are displayed at eye level. Budget options are placed on low shelves or in back corners. Displaying an expensive casket next to a visibly inferior cheap one creates an anchoring effect. Suddenly, $4,000 feels reasonable compared to $8,000. Time pressure is applied. We need to finalize arrangements soon to ensure everything is ready. Families are steered away from the one thing that would actually protect them: comparison shopping. Because a family that calls 3 funeral homes and compares itemized price lists will spend significantly less than one that makes a decision in a state of shock at the first place they call. And they know this. The system is built around it. Section 4. The corporate consolidation. There's another layer to this story that most people never see. The funeral industry presents itself as intimate, local, family-run, a neighborhood institution with a name you've known for decades. But increasingly, that name is owned by a corporation you've never heard of. Service Corporation International, SCI, is the largest funeral services company in the United States. In 2024, SCI generated $4.19 billion in revenue. It operates funeral homes and cemeteries in 43 U.S. states, 8 Canadian provinces, and parts of Germany. The critical detail: when SCY acquires a local funeral home, they frequently keep the original family name. Same sign. Often the same staff. Completely different ownership, and a corporate mandate to hit margin targets. SCI is not alone. Foundation Partners Group, North Star Memorial Group, and others have been systematically acquiring independent funeral homes across the country for years. In 2017, there were 19,322 funeral homes in the United States. By 2021, that number had dropped to 18,874. The decline is accelerating. What does corporate ownership mean for families? It means that the business making $12,000 from your loved one's funeral is not the local family that served your community for generations. It's a publicly traded company answering to shareholders, with margin targets and sales training programs. One family in Texas discovered this the hard way. They arrived to bury a family member at a cemetery their family had used for decades, only to be informed that the cemetery had been acquired by SCI, and there were new fees, new requirements, and a significantly higher bill than they had anticipated. They'd had no idea ownership had changed. The intimacy of the funeral industry is partly real. Many independent operators genuinely care about the families they serve. But the corporate layer underneath it is invisible. And it is vast. Section 5. What you can actually do. Here's the part of the video that actually changes something. Because unlike most of the systems we cover on this channel, the funeral industry has consumer protections built in. They're just almost never used because almost nobody knows they exist. The FTC funeral rule requires every funeral home to provide you with a written, general price list upon request. You can call a funeral home, ask for the price list, and they must give it to you. You can do this before anyone dies. You can compare 3 different funeral homes in an afternoon. Most people never do this, because nobody tells them it's an option. You have the right to purchase only the services you want. Funeral homes cannot legally require you to buy a package. You can decline embalming, you can decline a viewing, you can decline the premium facilities. You can buy a casket from a third-party retailer. Amazon, Costco, Walmart, and dedicated online casket retailers all sell them. And the funeral home must accept it and cannot charge you a handling fee. A casket that costs $3,500 at a funeral home might cost $900 online. The law is on your side. Direct cremation. The simplest option, where the body is cremated without embalming or a viewing, costs between $1,500 and $3,000 in most markets. That's a saving of $8,000 to $10,000 compared to a traditional burial. A separate memorial service can be held anytime, anywhere, for any amount you choose. And the single most powerful thing you can do, plan ahead. Families who make arrangements in advance, or at least research options before they're needed, spend dramatically less than families making emotional decisions under time pressure. Pre-planning removes the vulnerability that the industry depends on. The system is designed around the fact that you won't know any of this when you need it. Now you do. Conclusion? In 1963, a writer named Jessica Mitford published a book called The American Way of Death. It was a detailed investigation into the funeral industry, the markups, the manipulation, the exploitation of grief. It caused a scandal. It led directly to the FTC creating the funeral rule in 1984. 60 years later, the same practices she described are still happening. The casket markups, the upselling courses, the pressure applied to people in the worst moments of their lives. The industry is worth $20 billion a year. It has powerful lobbying arms. It has fought transparency requirements at every turn. And it has the structural advantage of knowing that its customers are, by definition, not in a state to protect themselves. Research shows that funeral products and services represent the third largest lifetime expense for most consumers. Almost nobody prepares for it. Almost nobody shops around. And the industry counts on exactly that. You don't have to spend $12,000 to honor someone you love. A meaningful farewell has nothing to do with what the casket cost. It has to do with the people in the room and what they say to each other. That's worth saying out loud. Because the industry built around death is betting you'll never hear it. Subscribe. Because on this channel, we keep following the money, even when nobody wants to talk about it.